Now, this video is mostly going to be a quick follow-up to another video I did a few days ago where I discussed whether or not Luke would die in the sequel trilogy, and if he did, how it would happen. And if you didn't see that video, I'll include a link to it in the description below if you want to check it out. But it certainly isn't required viewing for this video, because this video is mostly going to address the overwhelming response from people in the comments who wholeheartedly felt that Luke should not die in this trilogy. In fact, some of you went as far as to say you'd stop watching Star Wars altogether if Luke was killed off, and most others thought he deserved an old age death in a future trilogy or even in his own anthology movie at some point. There were even some who thought he should never die, or that it should at least never be shown, or that he'd somehow become a true Force wielder, kinda like the Bendu. And let me just say, I was thrilled by how vehemently some of you were against the idea of killing off Luke, and I loved a lot of the ideas I was reading on how his future and eventual end could be handled without having to kill him off in this particular trilogy. Because, as I've always said, he's my favorite character, and I don't want to see him die either, despite making a video about that very topic and how likely I even think it is to happen. But please keep in mind, I don't just make videos about what I want to happen, but oftentimes what I think is going to happen. But why do I think they'd kill off Luke in this trilogy, especially if there may be a great deal of backlash to it? Well, I think there is one really good and simple reason why Lucasfilm may do it, and that's because Luke, especially if he sacrifices himself and chooses his moment of death, will almost certainly become a Force ghost. And if he does, well then Luke will not only be able to be brought back in future movies, but be brought back indefinitely, assuming of course Force ghosts do stick around forever. Which means in a sense, Lucasfilm could have the best of both worlds here. A very epic, dramatic death for Luke in this trilogy that gives us all the feels and ends up motivating or changing the destiny of one or more of our main characters. And yet, they'd still be able to use him in future Star Wars movies. And you might then say, well, why not just skip the part about him having to die and just keep putting him in future movies? Or even give him his own anthology movie, which would certainly be a dream come true for myself and many other fans of Luke. Well, the problem with that, as my friend Mr. Search had to bring up in the comments of that video, is that Mark Hamill isn't exactly a young man anymore, and I don't know how much of a long-term plan you want to put in place for him, especially after what happened with Carrie Fisher. Now granted, Mark Hamill isn't what I'd consider old either, and believe me, I dread the thought of losing him, not only for the sake of the character of Luke Skywalker, but because he is truly an amazing human being, and I admire him far more for that than I do for being Luke, or the voice of the Joker in most animated Batman shows and movies. Anyway, my point is that the death of Luke Skywalker is not going to be the end of Luke Skywalker, not by a long shot I'd imagine, and no matter when Luke dies, whether it be in this sequel trilogy, his own anthology movie, or many years down the road yet, I'd be stunned if he doesn't become a Force ghost, and if he doesn't keep showing up in future saga movies. As I said in that last video, the original trilogy, though not 100%, was the story of Luke Skywalker, his hero's journey, and I think and hope he will be a big part of Star Wars for, well, forever really, and the funny part is, he really can be. And think of it, if maybe 30 or 40 years down the road, a kid is watching, let's say episode 19, and it's his or her first Star Wars movie, and Force Ghost Luke shows up and tells our new hero a story or helps in their training, well, that kid might be intrigued enough to later go back and watch those 70 or 80-year-old movies about that character. And before they know it, they're watching all the movies and becoming a lifelong fan of Star Wars. And if you're wondering about Mark Hamill being around that far down the road, especially after what I just brought up a few moments ago, well, something tells me Hamill is the type of guy who will be more than okay with being recreated digitally after he's gone. And 30 some years down the road, I'm sure it will be a flawless and commonly used technique in movies. And now you might be thinking to yourself, but doesn't Luke want the Jedi to end? How's he going to become a Force ghost if he doesn't even think the Jedi should continue? Well, another comment I received from that last video from Maudra suggested that perhaps, in the end, Luke will choose to become a Force ghost in order to ensure the future of the Order after having changed his mind throughout the course of the trilogy, which I thought is a fantastic idea, making the scenario I mentioned a moment ago about him showing up many years from now in the movies much more likely. Either way, whether Luke lives or dies in this trilogy, I think he will be a big part of Star Wars going forward, and always will be. Death is not his end, but rather just a new beginning for him. And thanks to those of you who very passionately argued that Luke shouldn't die in this trilogy. Not that it surprised me, mind you, but it was very cool to hear from so many others who do love and care about this character, and don't want to see his story end. And along those same lines, let me just take a moment to say thank you to those who watch my videos and to those who leave comments. I do literally read all of them, or at least 99% of them, because I'm sure some slip through the cracks from time to time. And I also reply to as many as I possibly can, which isn't always easy considering I do have a full-time job, family and friends, and from time to time I do like to partake in some reading or watching of all things Star Wars, or to play Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which someone asked me not long ago if I played, which finally convinced me to give it a try. And if you're one of those people who has left comments on my videos multiple times and never got a response out of me, then you have my apologies, and please don't let it discourage you from leaving future comments. Just know I am reading them, but sometimes all I have is 5 or 10 minutes of free time to read a few comments, but not enough time to really reply. And the funny thing is, I probably spend more time reading and replying to comments than I do making actual videos, because I really do love talking Star Wars with all of you. It's my favorite part of doing this. And a lot of you have some really great and amazing insight and ideas, and what I would like to do in the future is try and highlight some of those ideas and do maybe a weekly or bi-weekly podcast type video where I answer questions or give my thoughts on some of the top comments I've received. Now, if that's something you'd be interested in me doing, then let me know in the comments, because really I don't think of this as my channel as much as I think of it as our channel, and I'd like to make all of you as much a part of it as I possibly can. And with all that said, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn. Are you more okay with Luke possibly perishing in this trilogy if he becomes a Force ghost and hence is still a big part of the future of Star Wars, maybe even for as long as there is Star Wars, or do you still feel he should live on? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.